Welcome to the channel, folks. I'm Don. This is Rockin' the Country. I don't know what we're in for here, but every time I see Jerry Reed's name, I just think comedy. And I know he's got serious songs, but when I think of him being the snowman in Smokey and the Bandit and songs like Amos Moses and such, it's what comes to mind. But Penny Headland made a gift to the channel for me to do this song, Lord Mr. Ford. So, I do not know who the Mr. Ford is. I don't know if it was President Ford. I don't know if it was Henry Ford. But we're going to find out. And Penny sent me this shirt some years back. Figured I'd sport it today. The Jersey Cowboy rides again, rocking the country. Thank you, Penny, for this. So, all right, let's see what we've got here from Jerry Reed. It was a gift from the lovely Penny from Heaven Headland. Here we go. He's a good picker, too.
Well, if you're one of the millions who own one of them gas-drinking, piston-clanking, air-polluting, smoke-belching four-wheel buggies from Detroit City, then pay attention. I'm about to sing your song, son. A judge, very willing to hold a grudge, but I think it's time I said me a few choice words. All about that demon automobile, the metal monster with the polyglass wheels, the end result of the dream of Henry Ford. Well, now I've got a car that's mine alone, that me and the finance company own, a ready-made pile of manufactured grief. And if I ain't out of gas in a pouring rain, I'm a changing a flat in a hurricane. I once spent 3 days lost on a clover leaf. Well, it ain't just the smoke and the traffic jam that makes me the bitter fool I am, but this four-wheel buggy is $1 me to death. For gas and oils and fluids and grease and wires and tires and antifreeze and them accessories, well, honey, that's something else. Well, you can get stereo tape and a color TV, get a backseat bar and reclining seats, and just pay once a month like you do your rent. Well, I figured it up, and over a period of time, this $4,000 car of mine cost $14,000.99. Well, now, Lord, Mr. Ford, I just wish that you could see what your simple horseless carriage has become. Well, it seems your contribution to man, to say the least, got a little out of hand. Well, Lord, Mr. Ford, what have you done?
Nice. I wonder how this is going to conclude.
Now the average American father and mother own one whole car and a half another. And I bet that half a car is a trick to drive, don't you? But the thing that amazes me, I guess, is the way we measure a man's success by the kind of an automobile he can afford to buy. Well, now the red light, green light, traffic cop, right turn, no turn, must turn, stop. Get out the credit card, honey, we're out of gas. Well, all the cars place end to end would reach to the moon and back again. There'd probably be some poor fool pull out the pants. Well, now how I yearn for the good old days without that carbon dioxide haze hanging over the roar of the interstate. Well, if the Lord that made the moon and the stars would have meant for me, and you'd have cars, he'd have seen that we was all born with a parking space. Lord, Mr. Ford, I just wish that you could see what your simple horseless carriage has become.
He'd be all right with
well,
it.
Well, it seems your contribution to man, to say the least, got a little out of hand. Well, Lord, Mr. Ford, what have you done? Come away with me, Lucille. Am I smoking, choking automobile?
Yeah, it got me thinking, like, when did unleaded gas come along? Because I think most cars back then burned just regular, right? Not unleaded. I'm not quite sure when standards came along, the refining process, all that goes into all that stuff. But, I mean, yeah, we want to get from point A to point B. Then the airplane came along, and that's a whole different ballgame. I don't know if our lives are better or worse. You know, the village lifestyle where people don't have mass transportation. We typically would call them like third world countries, some African countries anyway, where it's just very village oriented, and you get to know all the people near you. And I don't know if our lives are better that we could travel elsewhere, because you still only have 24 hours in a day. You're only going to talk with one person at a time. I mean, nowadays you could talk to more on a Zoom call or something like that, or conference call. But for the most part, you're just taking yourself, your life, your interactions elsewhere. You spend time in the air, but the automobile, we're so used to it now, but people used to get around on horseback, but not everybody could afford a horse. But the point he's making here is that with the pollution and all that stuff hanging over, and then the one line that was funny, he's like, I spent 3 days lost on a clover leaf. And some of those things are, if you're like traveling out of state or something and you're not familiar with the road, now with GPS, it'll tell you, all right, get in the right lane and prepare to get off, fork on the right or left or whatever. So you're not likely to get lost as often. But this is just the nature of how things go. Now you look at like with Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos and Richard Branson and such, these billionaire folks are literally launching outer space flights. And in some cases, they've auctioned them off like $20 million. And they've conducted some, and they're fascinating. But eventually, that kind of space, like getting, from like LA to New York in an hour, eventually that's going to happen. And the way that's going to happen is you've got to get out of the friction of the atmosphere so you can hit those speeds, because we don't have metals that can withstand the high temperatures. So you've got to get into the very high atmosphere, like the SR-71 Blackbird used to fly at 80,000 feet. And I think once or twice it got to 120,000 feet. And it's much more fuel efficient up there. Otherwise, you flood the engines if you don't decrease the fuel intake, because you don't have the oxygen to burn the fuel, but you don't have the resistance ahead of you. All this stuff of progress. But going back to the automobile with Mr. Ford, yeah. I grew up in a town called Piscataway, New Jersey, which was one town over from Edison, New Jersey. And that's where Thomas Edison, Menlo Park, and it was right there, right next to Edison. And it was named after Thomas Edison because that's where he grew up. But there was a Ford manufacturing plant there. And I remember my father took my sisters and me to go see it. He wanted to see it. He couldn't have cared less what we'd seen. But it was fascinating to see the assembly line and all that. And that was one of the things Mr. Ford introduced, the assembly line. And parts, you can make 50 of one thing at a time. And instead of one at a time, like I guess Lamborghini and Borgata, and they make one at a time for there, and everything is custom made. But now everybody's got a car, and they're more efficient generally. But what do you say to this, Penny? Do you drive a Ford, or do you just like the song? I drove a Ford Mustang II when I was in high school. It was the first car that I ever bought. My older sister got to use my parents' car. Then when I came along, I had to buy my own. And fair enough, I was fine with that. And I almost bought a Mustang Mach 1. And that was badass. And this dude had tricked it out and all. I mean, he had like the gauges on the outside of the dashboard. He had them out there through the windshield. You'd see, it was pretty badass. But it was really bad on gas. And I just didn't want to pay that much for gas. So I bought a Mustang II. I liked it. And then I bought a Honda and on down the line. But anyway, all right, I'm going to rate this. Jerry Reed is just a cool dude. How you remember all those lyrics, I don't know. I mean, just you practice. But man, that was a rap song before rap was in vogue. This is country rap, basically, of a friendly kind, a funny kind. So, all right, the number that popped into my head was an 8.8. Not quite a Montauk Ed special, but that was just a fun song that got me thinking about. This is what you do, Penny. This is what happens to me with songs like this. I start thinking about sociological impact and mankind and anthropological considerations, when a song like this comes up, because progress is progress, or change is change, I guess. So depending on how you define progress. So there it is, folks. Jerry Reed, the one and only. Have a great day. I'll see you on another video. Keep rocking the country.